So I sanded back the the binding to the fretboard just roughly. I've still got to put a radius on this. Now, to bind this area, I thought the Purple Heart was going to be soft enough for me to just microwave. Usually what I'll do is I'll microwave wood in a wet paper towel and get it real steamy. And then I can bend it by hand or around like a coffee mug or something. But this stuff was so thick that I had to pull out my homemade burning iron. It's just a regular iron, women's iron that I shoved the guts up into a piece of pipe and then bolted it to a 2x4 so you could just clamp it anywhere. You get the wood wet, then you try to pull it across this as evenly as you can, and you'll hear sizzling. That's the steam leaving is what allows the wood fibers to temporarily bend and then stay in place. So when I cut off this portion of the fretboard, I kept the piece and I did it in one pass. So now I've got a clamp that lets me know that my curve is good. It fits in there just right, and so that will cut it. We'll miter these corners, and then I'll use this to help push the piece of binding in place down here. So it'll fit in there, squeeze it in. Then the fretboard will be ready for radiusing. I still need to drop some fret dots in there, but I can go ahead and drill for those now and add them later. Looks good. So I just finished sanding the body to within 90%. Just want to make sure I got this contour. This is when we really get a chance to see how well those glue joints set up, and you cannot tell that this is two different pieces of wood. It is going to look really, really nice. Let's see. Yeah. I don't know if you can see that. No, gaps in the seams. Just a really even. I was hoping that the color from using the same board, that we would, that the color tones would be the same, and so you get this really nice even look. That's going to be really pretty. So I need to flatten the top now. Once I flatten the top, I'll be able to set the neck where I want it, and we'll get a better idea of where the bridge is going to go, where's the pick guard going to set up, where's the control going to go. So, wow, look at that. That just looks awesome. It's going to be really nice. I can't wait to see what it looks like once I get it sanded down. The figure doesn't really pop until you get it all to where it's one, cohesive surface. Fretboard, I'm letting the glue dry. I've got my angle on there. It looks really crappy right now, but I haven't sanded it back. It always looks so hokey until you get down to being finished. That's going to be about right there. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Keep on trucking. So I've got my tongue sanded down. I've sort of started to taper the edges. It's going to be, I did it so that it's a little bit longer on one end than the other to follow these contours. It'll look really nice once the pick guard's on here. I've cut my fret marker holes. I'm going to come back with some epoxy and a black
mica powder, so it'll be metallic black. I'm real anxious to see how this turns out because I think it's going to look really cool. I'll do the same types of dots on the sides of the neck, but I've got to glue the fretboard on before I do that. Yeah, so here we go. It's got a good seam all the way around. It's, you know, couldn't be straighter. We're good. Just need to put these in, let the epoxy harden, and then I can put a radius on it and start doing the frets. But before I put a radius on it, I have to, you know, get it glued to the body, glued to the neck so that I can cut out the sides. So to do that, I've got to flatten this top, which is good because epoxy is going to take a day to set up. So I'll fill that, and in the meantime, I'm going to start sanding this flat. So I've got all my fret dots cut out, and I'm starting to add the epoxy. I'm using this gray Quilted dye. It's like a makeup dye. It gives it a metallic look. But I've also put a touch of black acrylic paint in with the epoxy, and so you get this. It's black, but it'll have some metallic tones to it. So I just drop a drop in there. Make sure it fills the entire hole that I drilled. Because tomorrow, when this stuff's hard, we'll come back and I'll be able to sand it back and start doing the radius to the fretboard. I think we're going to do a 12-inch radius, so like a Les Paul neck. I like to shave in a slight angle so that the fretboard sits facing away from you, but we'll get into that when I do that. So this should look pretty nice once these get sanded back. So we shall see. So I've got the top flat. I'm about to get ready to set the neck. So I'm going to pull my laser out and just double check everything. But so far so good. Looks really nice. This is sanded to 60 grit right now. And so I'll probably add some water and pop the grain here in a little bit. It's perfectly flat where it needs to be. Right here there's a little bit of, it's not a lot. It's flat enough. And so it's ready for me to do the neck. So let's get to that. Now that the top's flat, I drew my center line on the body, and then I ran a laser, and I lined up the neck with the center line, and I made sure. What's so difficult about this is there's so many parallel lines, and there's so many lines that look parallel but they're actually tapered, running against each other. It's impossible to see straight, so you really have to just trust your lines and all that stuff. Then what I do is I've got two boards that are the same thickness, and I'm going to use these to they're going to be guides for my flush trim router bit. I wedge these guys directly in to the spot where my tenon attaches to the body. They're all at 45-degree angles, and so everything fits really nice and snug. And I'll put some double stick tape on the back of these, get them in there real tight, and that's going to be the basis for how we route out the tenon, the hole for our tenon joint. So let me get some double stick tape. I'll get these all taped up. Now to get the correct depth for the neck to get set into the body, what I like to do is measure and lower the saddles to a point where they're really low. as low as that they'll reasonably go. And then I get my square and I mark that depth. So for these saddles, it looks like it's almost 3/8. And that's where they're really low. There's tons of room to come up. So I take that depth of 3/8, and then I take my fretboard and I hold it onto the neck and I mark that depth out on the side of the neck. So 3/8 is just above where the fretboard is. So I want my neck to be sitting out of the body that much. So 3/8. So I want the body to be about right there. So now what I do is I take my square again and I loosen it. And I come from the other end. So now I'm measuring this distance. And I get a depth of cut. So we're going to cut down to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7/8. So I'll come over here and just mark out where 7/8 is. So I know about how far down to go when I get this router cutting. So about right there. I don't really want to go any lower than that, but I've left enough wiggle room that I can go a little bit lower than that. This just does not want to stay on there. Okay, so next step is routing. We'll cut out the neck pocket, and then we can move on to deciding electronics and stuff. So here's my router setup. Use a flush trim bit with a bearing on it. We're going to drop in right here. Make sure we cut all the way through, because that's where the neck's going to join. The neck will join somewhere in there probably. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. Cross my fingers I don't screw it up. So I've got my pocket cut. I'm going to take this inside and we'll have to make a few cuts right here to straighten out the corners so that the tendon will fit in there. But you see I've got my pocket cut for the long tenon, and then this lip will have a curvature to it right here, and we'll put a heel block in there. It's going to look nice. Neck pocket is cut. It's really tight fit. Really tight fit. I'll probably shave off a little bit from the underside of the neck. I like for the glue to have a spot to go. But so far so good. Let's put some water on it to see what it looks like. Let me see. Do I have a rag or something? I'm really anxious to see how well the color tones match between the neck and the body. This is really pretty. Yeah. So that neck is going to fit really nice. So you need to glue this guy. It's going to fit about right there. Let's see what it looks like. I haven't even gotten to see the grain on the fretboard at all. Even though it's not sanded or anything, you can still get an idea. And again, I like to pop the grain. Yeah, so that'll sit about right there. Just like that. Here we go. It's starting to look like a guitar. So I need to do a few more cuts, get a few things sanded. You know, it is so slim. I bet a floating fretboard would look really cool on this. To have the pick guard. Pick guard's gonna have to go around this anyway because it's so low. Let's see. Where does that make 25? So let's see, we got nut. So that puts 25 right there, roughly. How are we sitting? Oh yeah. Just a little bit. Yeah, that's perfect. If anything, it's a little too low, but that's okay. The nut and the frets, we'll see. Ooh.